Email harvesting with the harvester. In this video, we're going to be exploring the process of enumerating emails belonging to a specific domain, which is of course your target, through the use of an open source tool called the harvester. And of course, the harvester works quite similarly to Sublister, where it utilizes search engines and publicly available databases to identify emails that might have been leaked or that are available online. So again, we're not performing active information gathering. This is all passive, and all of this information is publicly accessible. So again, we're going to be doing this from Kali Linux, and in my case, I'll be doing it from my Kali Linux VM. And of course, you can follow along if you want to. So I'm just going to switch over to my Kali Linux VM really quickly. All right, so I'm back on my Kali Linux VM, and I'm currently on the Harvest GitHub repository. As I said, it's open source and it's freely available. It really is a very cool, very powerful tool. As it says right over here in the About section, the Harvester is a very simple to use yet powerful and effective tool designed to be used in the early stages of a penetration test or red team engagement, i.e. information gathering or reconnaissance. You can use it for open source intelligence, also known as OSINT, gathering to help determine a company's external threat landscape on the internet. The tool gathers emails, names, subdomains, IPs, and URLs using multiple public data sources that include the following. So it uses the Anubis database, Baidu. Baidu is a Chinese search engine, Bing API, Census. You do require an API key to use Census, although that's really not required. It also utilizes CertSH, which is the Komodo certificate search, DNS dumpster, and in the case of email addresses, it'll essentially search for exposed email addresses on sites like LinkedIn. So, your typical social media or social networking sites. So LinkedIn is one that is very important. Why is that important? Well, if we are searching for, employee email addresses that belong to a particular domain, that information is really only linked in one area typically, and that is LinkedIn, because individuals usually post or specify what company they're working for on LinkedIn. And of course, there's a couple of other search engines and databases that it uses. It also utilizes Sublister for subdomain enumeration, which we've already explored, Twitter, VirusTotal, Yahoo, and of course Google, and a plethora of other search engines and public databases that contain data that could be potentially useful in this case. So the Harvester comes prepackaged with Kali Linux, although you can install it if you want to, or install the latest version. As I said, one thing that I wanted to point out is the functionality that the Harvester offers is broken down into passive info gathering and of course active. We're primarily focused on passive. So to use the tool, it's fairly simple. I'm just going to open up a terminal and we can type in the Harvester. There we are. And using it is fairly simple. We can specify the domain name and then the source. The source allows us to specify the search engine. So let's perform a few checks. So I'm going to say the Harvester and the domain hackexploit.org. And let's say I'm looking for email addresses. So I can say limit this to Google, and we can say LinkedIn. So I'll hit enter. And it's going to search on Google and on LinkedIn, and it's going to bring back names, email addresses, and subdomains if it does find them. As you can see, it's utilizing the Sublister functionality here because it's incorporated into this particular script. So we'll give this a couple of seconds. I have switched, or I am using a VPN server or a VPN, if you will, primarily because I've been running a lot of Google searches today. And Google is going to get really suspicious if I continue, performing quite a few Google searches as we did in the previous video. It's now going to search LinkedIn, and let's see whether it brings anything interesting up. Now, remember, I'm searching. My target is a domain name. I can also specify a company name, which I'll show you in a second. So I'm just going to wait for this to complete. All right, so you can see the Harvester is done, and it tells us that no users were found on LinkedIn, no IPs found, no emails found, no hosts found. Now that could be down to the fact that we're specifying our target as a domain, and also because we limited it to 2 search engines, or really a search engine and a social network. So what I can do is I can just get rid of the domain option, and we can specify the company name as the target. And in this case, I believe we actually can specify it. Can we specify that? I believe we still need to specify this as the domain. Let's see if that works out. There we are. So the target is Hackersploit. It's now going to search on Google, and then of course on LinkedIn. And I'll also get rid of the search engine option or the specification so that we can run it on all. And of course, in the case of Hackersploit, it looks like I've done a good job with sort of obfuscating subdomains, names, and of course emails. But that's something that we'll actually see at the end of this. So LinkedIn should be done, and we should be able to see. There we are. So nothing with regards to Hackersploit as the company name. So I can say hackersploit.org. And when I don't specify a search engine, you can see that that's what it, if I don't specify a source, that's what it tells me. So we can say Google, LinkedIn, Yahoo. We can also specify DNS dumpster. Another good site that we can, another good source rather, that we can use is probably one that I know works really well is, of course, DuckDuckGo and CRTSH. Let's try Hacker Target. That's not really required at this point in time. We can also try Project Discovery. I think that also requires an API key. We can try Rapid DNS. Remember, the objective of this particular video is to enumerate emails, but let's just run this and let's see what this brings up. So I brought up Rapid DNS. There we are. Okay, so let's see whether we get any results here. Okay, now we're talking. So it looks like in this case, we were not able to find any IPs, but we did, but no emails found, but we found hosts. So we found subdomains. So this time around, it looked like it worked for hackersploit.org. So we have apps.community, cloud.hackersploit.org, community.hackersploit.org, demo, forum, etc. So again, that's really not what we're interested in. So we're going to now switch this over to another domain. And in this case, let's try zonetransfer.me. Right, and let's actually see what this looks like. So let's see whether we're able to find any emails associated with the domain zonetransfer.me. All right, so it looks like we have much better luck with zonetransfer.me. No IPs found, but we did find an email. So pippa@zonetransfer.me. Now, as I said, the zonetransfer.me website was essentially set up, to teach students how to, essentially interact with the DNS server and perform zone transfers, which we will be exploring. But we do get an email. Now, why is this information important? Well, if you remember and go back to the introductory video to this course, I mentioned in a simple scenario that when we find emails pertinent to a particular target, the target could be a company, could be a domain, then an attacker could use that to send a phishing email, or they could use it to send an email with a malicious attachment that, when opened and executed, on a system, target system, could provide us with initial access. So, this is very, very important information. Under the host, you can see we found a couple of subdomains. So you can see we have contact, DC, office, and of course INTNS1. So, very good success there. The final site I'm going to try it on is, of course, ine.com. I expect a lot of success with this one, but, we can actually see what comes up. And by the way, all of this information that we're gathering will tie into the next video. The next video will be taking a look at leaked password databases and how we can potentially find passwords for specific emails or passwords linked to specific emails that can then be used to perform a password spray attack. A password spray attack, while this is actually performing the actual search, a password spray attack is when you identify a password, for a particular email for one site. So let's say I have found a password for a particular email, let's say for facebook.com. Well, many users tend to reuse password for different sites. So I can put, that's essentially what a password spray attack is. It's where I use the password I got from one site and I try and authenticate with other services like maybe Gmail or maybe QuickBooks, for example, as I have done before with previous engagements, and it has actually worked quite well. So all of the emails we find here, or that you typically find when performing email harvesting, will tie into the next video, which is again going to be really interesting. We'll actually see what we're able to find. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Alexis, you're showing us all of this stuff. Isn't any of this illegal? Well, as I said, all of this is available on the internet. Now, it's what we do with this information that might become, or might get into the territory of being illegal, which is why I have separated the activity, that you typically perform in passive information gathering, from the actual active information gathering, which does require authorization. So again, as a penetration tester, ensure that you abide by a code of ethics when it comes down to, public, to sites that are available, on the internet. So you can see these are all the subdomains for INE. No emails were found, which is very, very interesting, but I guess we can add a couple of more sources, but you get the idea. The harvester is extremely comprehensive because it not only performs email harvesting, but also subdomain enumeration, and you can probably fine-tune your searches and limit them to particular sources. One really cool one that I would recommend checking out is the Spice integration. This requires an API key. The Spice search engine is a search engine built for penetration testers for, essentially performing passive reconnaissance of a target like a website or an IP address. But it does require a subscription, which is why I'm not covering it. But if you are getting into penetration testing, do check out Spice, as it really is very, very useful. Okay, so I think that's going to conclude the practical demonstration side of this video.